Imagine you go out to a restaurant, right? You sit down, you look at the menu, and you order this massive, like a complex, dry-aged steak dinner.
Sounds great.
Yeah. The waiter brings it out, and the bill is $2.
Oh, wow. $2.
Right. Then you ask for a simple glass of tap water, and they charge you $50.
That makes absolutely no sense.
Exactly. You would look at that receipt and think, well, the fundamental laws of math and economics have just completely broken down.
Yeah, you'd think it was a joke.
But that completely broken math, that is exactly what is happening right now in the world of artificial intelligence.
It really defies all of our established mental models of how, how technology is supposed to be priced. We're dealing with an economy that operates on these invisible limits, highly counterintuitive billing, and just a total disconnect between what a task looks like to a human and what it computationally costs a machine.
Right. And untangling that bizarre economy is our mission for today's deep dive. We're pulling all of this from a single, incredibly detailed excerpt from the USA Visible podcast 15th edition.
The entire piece is this deep investigation into the confusing, kind of opaque token economy of modern AI. But to really understand the sheer level of frustration driving this deep dive into tech economics, we have to look at the massive, heavy preamble that sets it all up. Because the premise starts with this desperate need for distraction.
Yeah, it's a very deliberate pivot. The setup here explicitly avoids commenting on the ongoing political news cycles. The goal is to just sidestep what is described as a comedy show and absolute chaos until the midterms.
Right. And to illustrate that exhaustion, there is this rapid-fire list of specific political and global grievances. And to be crystal clear here, as we go through this list, we are strictly maintaining our impartiality.
Yes, absolutely.
We are not endorsing, validating, or taking sides on any of these viewpoints, left-wing, right-wing, or anywhere in between. We are simply reporting the exact framing the source uses to explain this intense desire to change the subject.
Right. The deep dive is not endorsing any of this. We're just looking at why they felt the need to talk about AI instead. Exactly. So the grievances listed include renaming lakes, trade wars against friendly countries, beef dumping, the Iran war, inflation, the price of diesel and gasoline, ballroom, racetrack, 9-month deployments, and stars and stripes suppression.
That's a lot.
It is. There's even a reference to a leader as Emperor Nero. It's framed as an overwhelming barrage of nonsense, reaching new lows by the minute.
That framing is so essential, though. The deep dive into AI isn't starting from a place of, optimistic futurism.
Right.
It's starting from a place of burnout.
Yeah.
The focus on artificial intelligence is presented as an escape hatch, a way to talk about something else to help the audience completely forget the current events and the geopolitical chaos.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the irony is that escape hatch leads directly into a completely different kind of chaos.
Yeah, it does.
The expectation is to find a calm oasis in technology, but instead it's a head-first collision with the paradox of AI pricing. The immediate contradiction is this. Why is AI getting more expensive as the models get smarter? Because chatbots started out entirely free. It was an open playground. Now everything is moving behind a paywall. And usually technology gets cheaper over time. Think of, flat screen TVs or cell phone minutes. Why is the source pointing out that AI is moving backward?
What's fascinating here is that the source is highlighting a major shift in consumer expectations. Consider the trajectory of how this technology was introduced.
Oh, okay.
It was rolled out as this massive, subsidized public experiment. You could generate code, write essays, brainstorm ideas, and it felt like limitless magic.
It really did.
But the honeymoon phase of the AI revolution is officially over. We are witnessing the jarring transition from a free public sandbox to a highly restrictive, monetized utility.
But push back on that for a second. We all know how consumer tech works, but these are incredibly advanced, continuously improving models.
Sure.
If a company builds a vastly superior product, an AI that is smarter, faster, and hallucinates less, shouldn't they charge more for it? Why is the shift from free to premium so uniquely jarring in this space?
Well, because it violates the expected commoditization curve of software.
Meaning what, exactly?
Usually, as the infrastructure to run a digital service scales up, the cost per user plummets.
Right. Economies of scale.
Exactly. But with large language models, the computational overhead is so staggering that scale doesn't necessarily bring cheap abundance. Instead, the more people use it and the smarter the models get, the more the companies have to throttle access to prevent their server farms from literally melting down.
Wow.
Yeah. That throttling is what leads to the highly complex, tiered business models we see today.
And that brings us to the actual mechanics of how we are paying for this. So if the era of free AI is over, the natural question becomes, how exactly are we being billed? The most common structure popping up everywhere is the three tiers system.
Like the tiers.
But the frustration isn't just about the existence of these monthly subscription tiers. It's about what those tiers actually get you because of this underlying mechanism called metered tokens.
This is where the illusion of access really starts to frustrate users. A monthly tier implies a flat rate for a service.
Like Netflix or something.
Right. But metered tokens mean you are actually on a strict, invisible allowance.
It feels incredibly similar to paying a monthly gym membership, but then you walk in, step on the treadmill, and realize you still have to drop quarters into the machine every 5 minutes to keep the butt moving.
That is exactly what it feels like.
You've paid for access to the building, but you haven't actually paid for the workout. If a user is already paying a monthly subscription, the source wonders why just asking a text chat question costs so much in tokens. The burning practical question here is, what can a lower tier truly accomplish with these metered tokens? Can a user actually start and finish a small project without the treadmill shutting off halfway through? Why is the source so frustrated by this?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, anyone trying to learn or use AI for productivity is hitting these invisible walls. The source is revealing a lack of transparency in how monthly access actually translates to real-world usability. To really understand why that treadmill shuts off, we have to break down what a token actually is.
Okay.
Because it's not a straightforward metric like a minute of cell phone time or a megabyte of data.
Right.
A token is roughly a chunk of a word, maybe 3/4 of a word in English. When you ask an AI a question, it doesn't just read your prompt. It reads your prompt, plus the system instructions, plus the entire history of your current conversation, so it remembers the context.
Wait, so if we've been chatting for an hour and I ask a simple 5-word question, the AI isn't just processing those 5 words.
Far from it. It is rereading and reprocessing the entire hour-long chat log just to understand how to answer those 5 words in context.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize it reread everything.
It does. Every single time you hit send, the context window gets larger and the token consumption grows exponentially.
Oh.
That is why a monthly customer feels double-dipped. You pay the subscription thinking you bought the tool, but the hidden token mechanics mean your allowance evaporates much faster than your mental model of the conversation suggests.
That is a profound lack of transparency. You literally cannot predict what a single text prompt is going to cost you in real time. And speaking of unpredictable costs, this is where the billing math moves from frustrating to genuinely bizarre.
Oh, yeah.
When we start comparing different types of media generation, text, video, and voice, the economic logic completely falls apart. Let's look at the steak versus tap water analogy again. The massive mystery here is why a generated video of less than 30 seconds can actually cost less to produce than an ongoing text-only chat conversation.
From a traditional computing standpoint, a video file is massive. It's rendering frames, physics, lighting, motion. Text is minuscule. A massive chat log is still just kilobytes of plain data. So human intuition screams that video should be the expensive luxury and text should be cheap.
Exactly. We've been trained for decades that rendering video will make a laptop fan sound like a jet engine, while processing a text document takes zero effort. Yet engaging in a deep text conversation with an AI can drain your metered tokens far faster than asking for a 30-second video clip. How is that functionally possible behind the scenes?
It comes down to the difference between a one-shot task and a continuous autoregressive task.
Okay, what does that mean?
When you ask an AI for a 30-second video, you send a single prompt. The server processes that prompt, runs it through a diffusion model once, generates the latent space, outputs the video file, and the transaction is done.
So it's one big effort and then it's over.
Exactly. It requires a burst of heavy compute, but it's a closed loop.
But the text chat is a continuously expanding loop.
Precisely. Because of those context windows we discussed. If you are 50 messages deep into a coding problem or a creative writing session, the AI is holding an enormous amount of data in its active memory. Recalculating the probabilities of the next word across a massive sustained context window requires constant, heavy lifting on the server side every single time you hit enter. Wow. The sheer volume of continuous rereading eventually outpaces the burst of compute needed for a short video.
It's fascinating because the user's perception of the product completely mismatches the reality of the server infrastructure. But the discrepancies don't stop there. The billing logic gets even more suspicious when we look at voice chat.
Right, the voice feature.
There is a massive, extremely high cost associated with having a verbal conversation with an AI. Now, on the surface, voice seems premium. But let's trace the source's logic out step by step. Isn't an AI voice fundamentally just TTS, text-to-speech, reading a text output?
Yes, text-to-speech, TTS, and speech-to-text, STT. These are not new bleeding-edge technologies. We've had dictation software and robotic voices for decades.
So here is the real kicker. If a user talks into their smartphone microphone, the phone itself, using its own internal processor, can transcribe that audio into text locally.
Right.
It does the heavy lifting of the audio processing right there on the device. Then it sends a tiny plain text file to the AI server. The server generates a text response, sends it back, and the phone's local software reads it aloud.
Exactly.
If the server is only ever receiving and sending plain text, why on earth is the token cost for voice chat still astronomically high?
This is such a brilliant deconstruction of the technical pipeline by the source. By mapping out local transcription versus server-side processing, it exposes a massive flaw in the pricing structure. The costs here seem entirely arbitrary. They are meticulously breaking down the logic to prove the pricing doesn't match the compute. The source is basically begging for clarity on these arbitrary costs.
But I'm going to play devil's advocate for the tech companies here for a second. Voice chat feels incredibly magical. It feels like you are talking to a human. Don't companies always charge a premium for the convenience and the wow factor of a slick interface? Isn't this just the AI version of the Apple tax? You pay more for the polished experience regardless of the underlying compute cost.
That is the exact business strategy at play, but it's fundamentally what is alienating the power users. Charging based on perceived value or novelty rather than actual compute cost breaks the trust of a user base that understands the underlying math.
Yeah, that makes sense.
When a user knows their own laptop or phone is carrying the computational burden of translating that audio, being penalized financially for a premium feature feels predatory. The billing model doesn't match the burden of processing.
It's rigging the game against the user's wallet. And that realization sparks a fascinating shift in the source material. Instead of just pointing out the weird math and complaining about the token drains, there is a hard pivot toward finding a highly specific technical loophole.
Yeah, they don't just complain, they look for a solution.
Exactly. It moves entirely into the realm of the developer. The ultimate goal becomes figuring out how to do longer, complex coding tasks without hitting that invisible wall.
Right, looking for an escape route from the token trap.
The central question is this: why does asking for code and running things in a command line interface cost so much, even when the software the AI is monitoring is sitting entirely on the user's local computer?
Well, because in the traditional model, to let the AI see your local software, you have to constantly upload chunks of your code base into the chat window. And as we established, constantly feeding text into the context window burns tokens at an incredible rate.
Right. So the source asks a final, hopeful question. Can a CLI with MCP running software locally on the user's machine help reduce token usage and allow for longer tasks? And it's interesting because the source has shifted from just complaining about costs to actively looking for a loophole, trying to use their own local hardware to offset the AI company's token metering.
The significance of this workaround really cannot be overstated. The source is mapping out a future where users try to take back control from an opaque billing system. By connecting a CLI, which is basically the raw text terminal of your computer, and MCP, which is essentially a secure bridge that lets the AI safely peek at local files, they are attempting to use their own CPU and memory to offset the AI company's metered toll booth.
Let's ground this in an analogy. Relying on the AI company's web interface is like hiring a brilliant consultant on a massive monthly retainer, but every time you want them to look at a file, you have to pay for their expensive downtown office space, the catering, and the overhead.
A very fast way to run out of money.
Exactly. But using a CLI and MCP is like saying to that brilliant consultant, I'm still paying your retainer, but to save on overhead, you are going to come work out of my garage. You are going to look directly at the files on my desk.
Right, and they are trying to build an environment where the AI can do the heavy reasoning, but the local machine handles the environment and the context.
Drastically reducing the data going back and forth.
Yes. It represents the savvy user trying to stretch their metered tokens to actually finish those small projects we talked about earlier.
It's a brilliant rebellion. They are desperately trying to stretch those tokens. It highlights this brewing tug of war in the industry. On one side, you have AI companies wanting to meter and monetize every single interaction on their cloud servers. On the other side, you have users trying to offload as much of the environment as possible onto their own local machines to stop the financial bleeding.
And that tug of war brings the entire exploration full circle. Think about where this started.
A desperate need for an escape. The initial setup was someone completely overwhelmed by the chaos of trade wars, inflation, and political nonsense. They explicitly turned to artificial intelligence looking for a distraction, a way to forget the exhausting reality of the news cycle.
They sought a pristine, logical, technological refuge. But instead of finding a calm oasis, they fell headfirst into a completely different, arguably more confusing kind of chaos. The opaque, paradoxical token economy of modern AI.
They traded geopolitical chaos for economic AI chaos, a landscape where text mysteriously costs more than video, where doing the heavy lifting of voice transcription on your own phone still results in a premium bill, and where local processing still incurs premium charges. Your monthly subscription is basically just a cover charge to access a machine that constantly demands more quarters.
The irony is profound. The technology itself might be capable of reasoning, but the business models surrounding it are deeply irrational to the end user.
And for anyone listening, this isn't just an abstract complaint for developers. Whether you are a casual chatbot user asking for a weekly meal plan, or a developer setting up a local CLI to code a new app, the source proves that understanding how you are being billed is just as important as knowing how to prompt the AI. Understanding the invisible difference between your flat rate tier and your tokens is vital.
Yeah, the billing anxiety has become an unavoidable feature of the software itself.
Which leaves us with a final, highly provocative thought to mull over. If we look at the trajectory of that CLI and MCP workaround, this growing movement of users trying to bridge their local machines with the AI to dodge the expensive token meters, it forces us to look ahead at the next move in this chess match.
Right, because if users successfully figure out how to offload tasks to their local machines to dodge these expensive token costs en masse, the tech giants are not simply going to let that revenue stream vanish.
They will adapt.
They will have to change their business models entirely. The question becomes, will AI companies eventually change their business models to charge us for the AI's reasoning itself?
Wow. If they start charging a premium just for the intellectual output, regardless of where the compute happens, that effectively creates a world where we're being taxed by tech giants just for the privilege of using our own computer hardware.
A completely new paradigm of software ownership and rental. Tax for the reasoning, not the rendering.
We wanted a clean, predictable progression of how our technology works and what it costs. But the deeper we dive into this token economy, the muddier the waters get. It is a fascinating, complex, and frankly, slightly terrifying landscape to navigate. Keep a very close eye on those token meters, everyone.